Hey, everybody, welcome back to the channel. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master. And when I was a kid, there was this TV series that I loved called Automan. And I'm always a little bit bummed out that nobody hardly ever seems to remember this show but me. Um, it was a short lived superhero show made by Glenn Larson, who, by the way, is the guy who made like Knight Rider and The Fall Guy. And I feel like a lot of the old Glenn Larson shows, not all of them, but a lot of them, they usually involved a memorable vehicle of some sort. So, of course, with Knight Rider, you had Kit. The Fall Guy had that brown pickup truck of his, the 4x4, which I always thought was really cool. Um, so like there's a maybe like a 90% chance if you can think of an 80s TV show with like a cool vehicle and it was like an action show, it was probably a Glenn Larson production. You know what I mean? And at any rate, so Automan, they filmed 13 episodes, 12 of them aired. The final episode, I don't know if it was because they got canceled or because it's set at this tropical resort. And like this show really leaned into the idea of like, let's just hire Playboy bunnies and stuff. Like you're hard pressed to find an episode of Automan without some really attractive girls in it at some point, right? And so that last episode had the most of that. And so I kind of wonder if that kept it from airing on TV. But it could just be too that they'd been canceled by then, and that's why the final episode didn't air. But the point is, the way I heard it, and take this with a grain of salt because maybe this is just like an urban legend or something like that. But the version I heard was that the original premise was it was actually supposed to be Tron, the TV series, which was a thing they used to do back in the day, where they'd have a movie and then they'd make a TV show about it, like Starman, which, by the way, is another Jeff Bridges movie, right? They did that with Starman, where there was the movie and then there was a TV series. So what I'd always heard was this was going to be Tron the series, and that kind of version one of the concept or the pitch was it's going to be set on the grid, just like the movie was, and it's going to be like the further adventures of like Tron and Flynn, right? And that because of budget reasons, because the original Tron movie cost a fortune, and they had such a hard time making that movie. Like I've seen documentaries about that and stuff that that was kind of the wall that they ran into where they're like, we can't do that. Like, we can't make that happen. So then, supposedly, version two of the concept was okay, what if instead of Flynn going into the computer again to have adventures with Tron there, right? What if we flip it? What if Tron came into Flynn's world and started fighting crime? Like, that could be a cool show. And I supposedly that gained traction, but then for whatever reason they didn't have the Tron the license or whatever you call it. So basically all the characters get new names. So the Flynn character um becomes this police officer who's works in their computer department, and then the Tron character becomes Automan, who's the title character of the show. And really, if you walk into it with that as your expectation, you've already got a pretty good grasp of what to expect from this show, right? And the other thing I thought was kind of funny, kind of cool, was that I think early on they really liked the idea of the light cycle. And like I said, these Glenn Larson shows were known for like a cool vehicle, right? And so I think that was the early premise was let's give them a light cycle. But I did hear an interview with Glenn Larson where he said, because they end up using a Lamborghini Countach, and he said that the whole reason he did that was because after the show got canceled, he kept the car. It was his way of buying a Lamborghini for himself was by having it in the show. But at any rate, I'm getting way ahead of myself. Before we get into the thing today, right? Smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell, and leave us a comment. Uh, Leaving a comment helps us out on our end with the YouTube algorithm, but also we just love hearing from you guys. We've got an awesome community here, and it's all thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. Okay, so all that said, let's dive in. So in the prologue to this one, we meet a police officer named Walter Nebeker, who works in the computer division of the Los Angeles Police Department. And the chief of police is this guy named E.G. Boyd, who hates computers. And he's an old fashioned cop. He thinks the police got along just fine without computers in the past. And he wants to eliminate the computer division altogether if he can, which would, of course, mean that then Walter would be out of a job. So one day, Walter creates a program called Automan, which, thanks to holographic technology, is able to materialize in the real world and fight crime. Automan, by the way, has a sidekick called Cursor, which is a little thing similar to the Bit character from Tron, which is the thing that could only say yes or no. Anyway, so Cursor can draw a wireframe of an object similar to the light cycle. And just like the light cycle, it can then become a solid construct that a person can use. Similarly, Cursor can draw a Lamborghini Countach, which solidifies, and once it's solid, it looks like a glossy black Lamborghini. And then anywhere where there's a change of angle, like where the hood meets a quarter panel, that edge is represented with a neon blue line. And those neon blue lines are the trademark look of Automan's gear. Cursor can also draw a helicopter, which Automan refers to as his auto chopper, and it can redraw the car in such a way that it becomes a car-sized, kind of like a spaceship kind of thing, and they call that the autoplane. So Walter keeps all of this to himself, not letting anyone know what he'd done, with the noteworthy exception of his attractive female coworker named Roxanne Caldwell, who at first on the show, he asks her out and she has no interest in going out with him. Then midway through the show's run, they seem to be a couple. They're like walking around in public holding hands and stuff. And then by the time we get to the 13th and final episode, it would appear that they've broken up. And the case that they are on in that final episode takes them to Club 10, which is a resort in the vein of Club Med. Its claim to fame is that you have to be a quote unquote perfect 10, a la Bo Derek, to be admitted. So only the most attractive people in the world are allowed in, which ironically means that Automan and Roxanne can get in based on their level of appearance, but Walter can't. Automan travels there claiming that his first name is Otto, as in Otto Octavius, and that his last name is Mann, as in Leslie Mann, right? So Otto claims that Walter is his servant, and then the resort sort of begrudgingly allows him to enter. And as soon as they arrive, by the way, Walter wants to hook up with some of the perfect 10 girls that are here. Roxanne, conversely, is not interested in romance at all right now because her best friend is a writer named Laura Ferguson who came here and mysteriously disappeared. So it turns out there are international diamond smugglers here at Club 10 who are hiding diamonds inside of various possessions of wealthy visitors. So then the smugglers fly to wherever these visitors came from. And so for instance, one guy's a rich guy who loves golf. So they're hiding diamonds inside of this guy's golf balls. And so he gets them through the airport without anybody opening his golf balls to look inside or anything like that, right? And then these guys are going to these people's houses and breaking in and taking the stuff back. And this is all an elaborate thing to like sneak things through customs. The point is that Walter and Automan rescue the girls and catch the smugglers with the help of another one of Walter's coworkers, who's a veteran police officer named Lieutenant Jack Curtis. And that brings us to the main plot, which takes place after this trip. It's after the final episode of the show. The characters all go back to LA. And recently, Lieutenant Curtis was suspected of murder. And a new reporter from the Los Angeles Chronicle named Tom Scholes started investigating him recently. Scholes, by the way, hates all cops and wants to think of them all as corrupt and, abusing their power and so on and so forth. And when he investigated Lieutenant Curtis, he sensed something was off about all of this. So he does some digging and he starts to interview everybody that Curtis has arrested in the last year since Automan was created. And it's amazing how many of them tell the same stories about a man who can appear and disappear, how he travels in these weird vehicles that are all glossy black with those neon blue edge lines. And in a lot of the stories, either he's stealing electricity from something or he's shooting electricity at something or someone. So eventually the reporter interviews a man named Ronald Tilson, who is one of the few hackers that we have in our game world at this point so early in our timeline. So Tilson overrode the electronic lock on a dam, causing a flood. And then he also hacked an air traffic control tower when the mayor's office refused to pay his ransom demands. So when Tilson speaks with Scholes and finds out what Scholes knows, Tilson figures out Automan's secret. And during a riot at the California State Prison, Tilson manages to shut down the security system and escape. Once Tilson gets to a computer terminal, he looks up Walter Nebeker online, gets his home address and phone number, and then he hacks Automan. So Automan appears, and Walter is confused because Walter didn't summon him. And Automan's trademark blue trim turns neon red, and he backhands Walter, knocking him out. Then Automan orders Cursor to create the autocar, and Cursor does, but now it too has this glowing red trim. So Automan drives to where Tilson is, and they go on a crime spree. And the corrupted Automan is able to interface with ATMs and take money at will. Automan can rob banks and is totally bulletproof. Automan also has some degree of super strength as well as Taskmaster's power to duplicate any skill he's ever witnessed. So Tilson literally shows him Bruce Lee movies, giving Automan peak human dexterity and martial arts skills. So Walter goes to work where he uses the work computer, and he wrote the Automan program, and it can be installed on any computer. So Walter installs the program on the work computer, and it loads a fresh Automan with all of the saved memories that he had right before Tilson broke out of prison. So Walter tells Automan about his evil twin, and he goes on patrol. And while cruising around Los Angeles in the auto car, the heroic Automan detects a bank alarm, so he goes to investigate. And he parks his black and blue auto car behind its counterpart, the corrupted black and red auto car. Just then, His evil twin exits the bank and sees his heroic counterpart. So we roll initiative. The bad guy rolls a 3, while the good guy rolls an 8. So it's the heroic Automan who gets to go first. He needs an 11 or better to hit because they're completely equals. And he rolls a 7 and a 3, so he missed. Then it's the evil twin's turn, and weirdly enough, he also rolls a 7 and a 3. So he misses too. I thought that was odd. It's one thing when we say in game they're identical. It's another thing, or it's a little weird when they're like rolling the exact same thing in the exact same order. At any rate, so right now, by the way, there's about 8,000 megawatts of electricity available in the Los Angeles power grid, which the two Automen have to split equally. So that means at the beginning of the fight, they both have a body of 13 APs. Anyways, so the hero rolls double fives and then a 5 and a 3 for a grand total of 18, which is 3 column shifts. So he does 8 points of damage, taking the evil Automan's body from 13 down to 5. Then the villain rolls, and he rolls a 10 and a 9, which does 8 points of damage, taking the good Automan's body from 13 down to 5. So again, the fact they're matching up was kind of like weird. So the hero goes again, he rolls a 10 and then a 4. He does exactly 5 points of damage, which is exactly what he needs to defeat the other one. And so the evil red Automan fades away. The good Automan then has his cursor use the illusion power, which we saw multiple times in the shows where they, like at one point, there was like a red Jeep parked in a parking lot. The bad guys were running out to get into it. So they made more red Jeeps in the parking lot to try to slow the bad guys down, stuff like that. Or they can take the auto car and they can put an illusion over it that it's like an ordinary car. So using that power, they make the good auto car look like the bad auto car, right? And so then Automan drives to Tilson's place pretending to be the villain. Tilson lets him in, and it looks like a corrupted Automan is hauling in all this bank loot. But once he's inside, it turns out the loot was an illusion. It like de-reses, it fades away. Um, but then Tilson uses a device called an energizer ray, which looks kind of like this chrome sci-fi ray gun kind of thing. And it shoots a green laser, which actually disrupts Automan's particles. So Walter tackles Tilson and they get into a fist fight and Walter knocks him out. And that was something that we saw through the series is that's kind of Walter's dream is to become more action oriented and not be stuck in a lab and not be the nerd. So he's slowly becoming more of an action hero as the series went on. So Walter gets his moment here where he gets to knock out the bad guy. Automan then vanishes, going back into the computer world and to recharge, which for him works like the regeneration power, where it gets him his lost hit points back. And Walter recovers everything that Tilson stole, including the hard drive that the evil Automan was installed on. And so Walter, at the end of this part of the adventure, uninstalls the evil twin so that he's not going to be a problem again. And Tilson is, of course, returned to prison. And that brings us to the epilogue. The Los Angeles Chronicle publishes a story by Tom Scholes about Walter Nebeker and Automan, revealing their secret, specifically about how Nebeker frequently disobeyed orders, how Automan was guilty of repeatedly impersonating an FBI agent who the LAPD had been led to believe was an actual human being named Agent Man, and even how Automan is just a huge drain on the city's power grid. And Chief of Police Boyd hated computers before all this bad press. So now he finally has the excuse he's been looking for to fire Nebaker. But that's not the end of Automan. Walter builds a new computer that's better than the first computer he had built, and he refines the Automan program, this time with antivirus software, basically. So Automan returns better than ever. And now they don't have to deal with the various bureaucrats that were constantly in their way before. And Walter's still friends with Roxanne and Lieutenant Curtis, who can now bring him the crimes that the LAPD can't solve. So their adventures continue. But that's a story for another day. So I really enjoyed this one. I hope that you did too. If so, as always, smash that like button. Make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and leave us a comment. From all of us here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.